Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be going over all of the changes for the spring release. Now this is it's not an upcoming balance patch or patch to cards, because it actually just came out today. Over the last 2 weeks, they've been slowly showing off all of the things that are going to be in this patch. It's a very big patch, it's not just your standard couple bug fixes and some balance changes patch. There's quite a few changes to go over, and I wanted to wait until all of them had been announced to put it into one video. And I was considering doing a separate video for my thoughts on the balance changes and the reworks, but I'm just going to see where it goes from here. But probably all of this is just going to be one big video talking about the new patch. So let's just roll the intro and jump straight into the changes. Alright, so the changes that they've added to cards really affect almost every aspect of the game, and some of them are good. Some of them we'll have to see how they play out, and others are controversial, let's say, if you haven't been following a lot of the drama that's been going down in the Cards Discord. But let's just go through them as they were released. So this is first one, 13 days ago, Battle UI enhancements. Each of these changes came with a video where essentially they just break down the same thing they have in these articles, just with a couple more visuals. So the battle enhancements include a new battle history rework, which is something that I've been asking since 2020. If you go back on the Cards YouTube, you can find their AMA streams that they used to do, and you can see me like 2 or 3 AMA streams in a row. I ask about them reworking battle history, and they interpreted that as me asking questions about like the history section on the cards in the collection. So I'm glad that they finally reworked the battle history, but we'll see how it was reworked. There's new end of battle interactions and further UI enhancements. So what does all of this mean? So first, the battle history rework. It now allows you to see 3 turns. It allows you to see everything that happened in the previous 3 turns, no matter how many things happened. Previously, it was limited to the amount of interactions that happened. And they have also broken up a lot of these interactions to make it more clear. So in the past, you would have one card that, you'd play a carpet bombing. The carpet bombing would trigger a bunch of destruction effects. The destruction effects would hit other things that trigger those destruction effects, which triggers like a passive effect. Like, there would be all sorts of things happening, and it would all show on the one card that made that happen. Now they've broken it up. So in this example, you can see they play carpet bombing, and then there is separate entries for each of the destruction effects the carpet bomb triggers. And you can scroll up here to see the previous turns. So on the one hand, this is pretty good. On the other hand, as we'll see, because I'll show off some of these changes in the actual game in a minute since the patch is out, you have to... The card's history is now closed by default, and there's this big ugly button in the middle of the side of the screen where you can open it. And when you open it, it brings up this, which, again, it's wider than the previous version. There's more space between each entry than the previous version. These symbols on the side are completely meaningless. So you see the upwards arrow is moved to the front line, but the sideways triangle is triggered destruction effect and played card. So yeah, this entire thing feels like largely a step down. The benefits are there. You can see more information than you used to be able to. The downsides is that information is now presented to you in just an objectively worse way. Also, as you can see in this example, when you hover over the cards, it grays out the entire rest of the screen, and if you click back on the screen to, play a card, attack, whatever, move a unit, it closes the history. You cannot have the history open while interacting with the board, which is not like some, programming issue, because that's how it used to work. That's how it worked in the game up until this patch. They just changed it to make the history... They're like, well, we'll give you the history... We'll give history giving you more information. However, it's going to come at the cost of you being able to actually use it in an efficient or user-friendly way. It just kind of blows my mind how they thought this was an improvement. There's end-of-battle enhancements. So now when you finish the game, there's going to be a view battlefield button that's going to let you go back, look through the card's history for the last 3 turns, send any more emotes you want, look at the board state, take screenshots, whatever it is you want to do. So previously, once one of the HQs blow up, it would just pull up the end of game screen and then you can't do anything. So, this is just generally a good improvement. I like this one. And then there's some battle UI enhancements, which includes a new credit counter, which we will talk about. The credit counter rotates to give you the feeling that your credits, to give you more depth and feeling to your credits as they accumulate and are spent. We will talk a lot about this once we get into the game to show off what these features are like. And they're also tweaking how player names appear on the board to help these stand out a bit more. We will also be talking about this more. Keep this one in mind. Player names now are stand out more. We will remember this one. But that's it for the first article. Now, the second article is the battle-ready decks on the way. This one is just cool. Essentially, they have brought back battle-ready decks, which are they're sort of meta-ish decks of a bunch of different varieties for each nation, including for each ally nation, and you can just buy the decks in the shop with diamonds, and they will come with all of the cards included in the decks, which include quite a few very good elites and specials. Now, I've not looked through all of these decks card by card, so I'm not here to give you any recommendations on which deck you should buy if you do want to buy one of these decks, but from my point of view, this is just a good change. Like, if you don't want to buy them, you don't have to buy them. If you do want to buy them, if you've downloaded cards and you wanted to jump straight into it with a competitive deck that you think looks interesting, then get one of these pre-built decks. I've seen some people complaining about this. Anytime they add something to the shop, people complain about the game becoming more pay to win. This doesn't take away from anything else. You know, if you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. If you do want to buy it, I think it's cool. This is just a quality change. There's 2 different price points depending on how many elites and special cards the decks include. And the one downside is that they rotate, as far as I'm aware. Rather than just being available to purchase in the shop. I'm not positive about this. I will have to check this, but if they do rotate, I mean, I don't understand why things in the shop just aren't available all the time. But let's get on to the third article, which is the Friends Panel Enhancements, which, now, the next article is the one about the balance patch and the reworks. And, you know, that anytime they do anytime they change a card ever, there's going to be controversy. The Friends Panel Enhancements was by far the most controversial. So let's jump into it. So what is so controversial about enhancing the Friends Panel? I mean, the Friends Panel in cards is basically useless. There's very little you can do with it, so it's kind of hard to make it worse. And also, nobody uses it. So it's kind of hard to, like, if you did make it worse, most people probably wouldn't care. So how do you mess up the Friends Panel enhancement? Also, why, when you select this, does this become unviewable? Anyways, well, let's take a look at what they did. Last played opponents. So now, when it will display on the Friends Panel, the last 3 opponents you played against, with the ability to add them to your friends list. So this is really good. Because I think a long time ago there was an add friend at the end of game feature, and then they got rid of that. And then it just became really difficult to add certain people, like especially if their name was not in the language that you used your keyboard on. So for example, if you use the Latin keyboard and your opponent is Chinese, or if you're Chinese and your opponent's using the Latin keyboard, or like Cyrillic, or like this is just a positive change. It makes it easier to add people on your friends list. And then we get to copy opponent's deck. So I'm just going to read out what they have this note here. Many players have found themselves facing an incredibly powerful or particularly entertaining deck, wondering what secret spices make up their opponent's deck and how they can achieve similar results. The answer to how they can achieve similar results is use the Add Friend button to add them as a friend and then message them, hey, that's a cool deck, can I see it? You know, something that enhances the community aspect of the game. That's something that encourages people to talk to each other, to discuss decks. It might lead them to them inviting them to a Discord, whether it's the main Discord or maybe a smaller group private Discord. It can lead to conversations, ideas going back and forth. That is how you build community. And I assume that is why you had the Add Friends button, that literally the previous feature you mentioned, the add the last 3 friends. But no. The ability to copy an opponent's deck is a significant new feature that will bring some Cards players closer to the answer to that question, at the cost of destroying any, like, potential connections formed with new people through playing this game. So going forward, you'll be able to copy any deck from an opponent who plays against you. Copying an opponent's deck works the exact same way as copying your own deck code from the game, where you'll be able to directly import it into a new free deck slot in your own library, or paste it into a text document to get a full breakdown of what's in the deck. We'll come back to this. Note that you only have access to your opponent's deck after the battle. You won't be able to copy your opponent's deck at the start of the battle, for example. You'll be able to copy the deck of your last 3 opponents. You'll need to own every copy of every card in the opponent's deck in order to be able to play it. I mean, that's all pretty straightforward. While this can give great insight into an opponent's strategy, it'll be up to the deck copier to figure out how to best play the deck to see success and lead their forces to victory. So you can already tell that they know this is going to be controversial, so they're trying to cover their like they're like actively trying to be like, okay, like, yes, you get to steal people's decks. However, that just because they steal your deck doesn't mean they'll be good on your deck. Which is true. But, like, did they just forget that people play this game competitively? Did they just forget that they have a tournament scene? A tournament scene where the only tournament you qualify off of ladder? The only tournament where your qualification off of ladder is how well you can do in a very short period of time on ladder, queuing against other opponents who are now going to be able to copy your deck after every single game? So it's not a worry. Like, if I queue into a rank 25 rando and they copy my Jagro, I'm not worried that they're suddenly gonna hit Field Marshal and then get to rank 1. That is not a worry in my mind. If they DM'd me on Discord and said, hey, can I see your deck? I would give it to them. I do not care. If I queue into another player in top 6 who regularly makes tournaments and they copy my deck list, they know how to play the game. They know how to play the deck. They might not have that. And, like, I know a lot of people are like, well, you know, the meta's the meta. People at the top play the meta. But competitive players will make 3 to 4 card changes from, like, the meta list. And those 3 to 4 card changes are what oftentimes is what makes the difference between getting top 2 and getting straight into the top 8, or getting top 34. Or the difference between getting top 34 and, like, ending 50th and missing out on qualifiers. Like, those are the fine margin details that gives advantages to better players and players who build up communities of people who can test out different decks. Adding the ability to anyone to immediately copy any deck just completely ruins this. And it's not just for competitive players. Like, there's... Now, obviously, the issue of people copying your deck, some people just don't want people copying their decks, and I think that's perfectly valid. But then there's also the worry that, like, a rank 25 player who has no idea how the game works is gonna, like, play, like, their 3rd game and get completely blown out by somebody just slamming, like, 30 bombers, like, playing Liberator and whatnot. Like, it's gonna just be an absolutely awful deck that steamrolls them because it's, like, all bombers or all artillery or something. And that opponent's gonna be like, wow, this guy destroyed me, copy their deck code, and then spend all of the wild cards they get at the start of the game on these terrible cards, and then they have no resources and they quit the game. Whereas before, if you would go to the Discord and be like, hey guys, I just lost to a deck that ran all of these cards, should I craft these cards? Like, what are these cards? Are these cards good? And people would be like, no, these cards aren't that good. Here's ways you can play around bombers. Like, it is insane to me how much this simultaneously ruins, it, like, absolutely ruins the community building aspect of cards. Like, it literally just removes any reason to ever interact with somebody within cards. And then it also arguably harms the new player experience. Now, I think there's definitely a point where you have some idea of what's going on, but you still have a somewhat limited collection where this can benefit you. Like, I'm not saying that there's no benefits to this feature. But then it also ruins the competitive aspect of this game. Like, you really just managed to screw the pooch and create the worst possible feature ever. And, again, all of this would be good for the people who want to do it. Like, this is a good feature. Like, if people want to share their decks, I'm fine with people sharing their decks. If somebody wants to ask me for my deck after we play against a match, I will probably give it to them, unless they're, like, a top 34 player. And even if they are a top 34 player, I might give it to them. But forcing people to have their decks stolen against their will is just a bad idea. Like, the fact that there is no opt-out feature. If you created an opt-out feature, like, if you made this feature, and it's on by default, and then you could go into settings and turn off, like, deck copying, so opponents cannot copy your decks without, like, requesting. Like, don't even make it so it turns it off. Make it be, like, you get a pop-up on your friend's notification and be like, your previous opponent wants to copy your deck. Yes or no? Just do that, and everybody would be happy. Well, like 99.5% of people would be happy about this feature. But no, they are dying on the hill that this is fine to have in the game. The response to this was, well, we might look into it in the future. But it's too late for us to add this feature in this current patch. So my response to that would be, well, don't add this feature in the current patch. Remove it from the patch and wait until the following patch to add it alongside an opt-out feature. If you're not ready to release a feature, don't release it. And of course, there's some people who would argue that, like, okay, well, like, we don't know where along the development process this is in terms of patching things, now that it's on mobile and PC. Maybe, like, they've already shipped everything and it's too late to change the contents of this expansion. I kind of doubt that it was too late, but maybe it was too late, and okay, fair enough. Now, I think that would be something that you could change server side, but maybe you can. I'm not a programmer. I'm not going to pretend to understand how that works. But the funny part is, when the patch released today, the deck copy feature wasn't working. There was a bug in the servers. Like, it was a server-side bug that made the deck copy feature not exist. Like, it wasn't there. You couldn't use it. And then they fixed the bug. So I don't want to hear any 1939 apologists being like, oh, the patch times, development times, their hands were tied about this feature. They have actively chosen to release the worst feature in Cards ever. And I do not use that hyperbolically. There's arguably been worse patches in terms of balance, but in terms of just features added to the game, this is the worst feature they have ever added, and it's not even particularly close. And they are doubling down on it every chance they get. I am not playing Cards competitively until they add an opt-out feature. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I will compete in the tournament that I already qualified for, the upcoming top 8 in the OCC, because I'm in the top 8, obviously. But I am financially incentivized to not play the game. I'm financially incentivized to not play the game, because that tournament is, like, basically the last day of March. If I play any of the decks that I want to play in that tournament on ladder between now and that tournament, which is the last day of March, it's just giving my opponents benefit. I am lowering my chances of winning money. And because the tournament is so late, which is another issue, because the tournament is so late, it means that there's not going to be any amount of time between playing the tournament and playing on ladder to then qualify for the next tournament, even if I wanted to. And, like, frankly, I don't want to, because it's just toxic. What this is going to lead to is small groups of people copying the deck code of every single opponent they ever see on ladder, putting it in just one massive shared Google document that's going to be thousands of pages long, with a search function to search for the name of your opponent so you can find out what is probably the exact deck list of your current opponent, and not just top 34 players. This is everybody. The number one way you lose on ladder as a top player is not to other top players, it's to random people playing cards you don't expect because they're not playing a predictable meta list. So, like, this is just going to drastically increase the win rate of established competitive players with communities. Because I saw some people arguing, like, oh, this change is removing the gatekeeping of competitive cards. It allows anybody to access competitive cards without needing to be an established player. Like, the competitive players who are against this change are gatekeeping the game. Except the competitive decks are published after every single tournament. If someone is engaged with Cards and wants to become a competitive player, they have the tournament list of every single player from every single tournament posted publicly every single month. Getting deck lists is not the issue. The issue is, one, getting into your first tournament, and two, making connections in the community to do these sort of communal aspects of playing Cards competitively. And this deck copy feature is just drastically increasing the importance of already having an established community. It's making it harder for new people to get into Cards competitive. Again, this change is genuinely awful. It is difficult to state how bad this change is and how simple it would be to fix it. Just add a simple opt-out feature. If you don't want people copying your decks, you don't have to let them copy the deck. Like, even if they did that, most people would probably leave that feature on so it would still be gatekeeping competitive because you would still be able to copy the decks of a lot of players on ladder, which is still going to give an advantage to people with established communities. So, like, again, there's downsides of this feature, just period. But most of the downsides come from the fact that you can't opt out. So just literally add an opt out feature. It blows my mind that 1939 didn't consider this. That they didn't, you know, that they didn't like try to test any of this in advance. Just be like, hey guys, this is a feature that we're thinking about. What do you think? Or even be like, hey, this is a feature that we have made and it will release in 2 months after some bug fixes. Is this something you guys like? Not a, hey, this is a feature that's coming in like a week and we can't change it, so suck it up. Like, it's insane. It's insane. They could have, they have so many people. There's so many ways they could have figured out that everyone would have hated this change. Even if you just take for granted that 1939 is just blind to the fact that this is an awful change themselves. I don't know how they could do that, but that is enough talking about the Friends panel. Let's get on to the balance patch and the reworked cards, because I'm sure this is what a lot of people are probably most interested in seeing my opinion on. So there was a balance patch. Obviously, I made a video a couple of weeks ago giving my ideal balance patch, what cards I think are the most in need of nerfing, and it was specifically like a nerfed focused balance patch. 1939 really likes to buff cards, and what they choose to buff, it's up to them. I don't have strong feelings about buffs. So this is a handful of nerfs, a large number of buffs, and then reworked cards. So cards that were previously in out of standard rotation. So these were cards that were removed. And these are cards that were removed because they were either way too strong or way too toxic to ever be allowed back in the game. Like, these were cards that were never, ever, ever being added back to the game in their current forms. So 1939, rather than let these iconic cards just rot in Classic, a game mode that they clearly have no intention of ever supporting, they decided to rework their abilities into things that are more tolerable and then add them back into the game as sort of like these new cards. So these are new cards that are like sort of, they're not really new cards. If you had them before, they're still in your collection, but they are quote-unquote new cards that are being added into the game, so that, you know, we can shake up the meta a little bit as we're at probably the halfway point between the Winter War expansion and the upcoming Summer expansion. And also I should clarify, not all of the cards were because they're too strong or toxic. Some of the cards were because they're too bad to ever see play, and rather than just trying to buff them, they brought them back. But yeah, let's get into the cards. They're sorted by nerfs and then buffs and then reworks. So the nerfs, the Panzer Grenadiers, everybody saw this card getting nerfed. They nerfed its health from 4 to 3. This is the least possible impactful nerf you could have made. If you only changed one thing on this entire card, this is the least impactful thing. 2-4 would be worse than this. 5-op would be worse than this. Removing Blitz would be worse than this. Did I say 2-4 already? 2 operation cost would be worse than that. Like, this is literally the most meaningless change you could make. Something else that I wish I'd put in my ideal balance patch video that I was thinking about is, instead of 35T, you could make this give the flak the 1-2 tank rather than the 35T, the 2-2 tank. That would be an interesting nerf, and also just cool to see a card that's not already in every single deck. But no, they literally went for the least possible impactful change to probably the #1 most played card in the game, I would guess, at least like at a high level in terms of across all decks. This is in every single German main or ally deck of every single archetype. It's in aggro, it's in mid-range, it's in control, it's in discard. This card is just absolutely insane, and this change doesn't do anything. Everyone is still going to run this card in all of those decks. And this card's still going to be insane. Like, it's very difficult to understate just how meaningless this change is. You will not stop seeing this card. And I don't understand why 1939 wants this card to just be like the most played card in the game. Then we get to the Glamour Boys. So this is also a health reduction. Its health goes from 3-7 to 3-6. And I know a lot of people are unhappy about this. Because they view it as the same as this type of change. They view the 7 to 6 health as being the least possible impactful change you could make about Glamour Boys. I would push back on that. Now, obviously, you could have nerfed it harder. There's very simple ways you could have nerfed it harder. You could make it a 3-5. You could make it a 3-6 and make it only heal 3. On top of that, like, there's an endless number of ways you could nerf it harder, but you could have nerfed it much less by, for example, making it 2 operation cost. I think a 3-7 heal 4 2 operation cost would be much better than the 3-6. And if you just made it heal 3 rather than heal 4, I think that would still be much better than the heal 4 but with 6 health. Because I think a lot of people look at the HQ, their opponent's HQ, and like, you know, when they're dying to Commonwealth and they hover over the HQ and their opponent's at like 30 health and they healed 16 from Glamour Boys, they think Glamour Boys healed so much. You know, if they had healed 12 instead of 16 from Glamour Boys, if each Glamour Boy healed 3, they'd have 4 less health, so therefore they wouldn't kill me with Commonwealth. So therefore reducing the healing on Glamour Boys is the most impactful change. However, what you don't think is how many times you would be able to attack face with like an extra 5th Rangers or Hellcat or Schutzen or even just a 35D. How many additional times would you be able to attack face if Glamour Boys was a 3-6 rather than a 3-7? How many times would you be able to just double trade into Glamour Boys and then go face with the rest of your units rather than having to triple trade into Glamour Boys? Or needing to double trade with your 2 biggest units rather than double trading with your 2 medium-sized units. And then that continues to go on because one of the most common board states against Britain is they play Glamour Boys. You hit a 4-4 and like a 3-4 into it, and then they play Supply Shortage and they kill your 4-1 and your 3-1. But like if you're hitting you're hitting a 3-3 and a 3-4 into it, and then you hit face for 4, and then they play Supply Shortage, and the bigger unit survives. So not only are you dealing more damage on that immediate turn, you're also dealing more damage on additional turns. That means you're also keeping more stats on the board to trade off units, which is going to allow other units to go face. Like, all of it just allows you to get more tempo against Britain, which is going to lead to much more damage dealt by you because of the less health than they get healing from them being +4 instead of +3. So this is definitely not the most impactful change they could have made. I think the people saying that this should have been a 3-7 heal 3 are mistaken in what makes Glamour Boys good. So I'm happy with this change. People are still probably going to play it. I mean, I like this because it's still a good card, and it's a card you can consider, but it's not like a card where it's just like, yeah, I'd put in 4 of them in any deck. It's not bad. Then we get to the scrap metal change. I think this is literally 1-for-1 the change I suggested in my video. So I'm very happy about this. You add 1 credit to the scrap metal, and then rather than just doing gain 3 credits 0k, it's 1 credit gain 4, which means that it slows down how early in the game you can pop off with this. I think this is just generally a positive change. It also breaks my even German-Finland jet deck, which I really wanted to bring to OCC, but this patch came out too fast. So that's really sad. I had an even jet deck, and this change completely breaks it. But whatever. Then we get on to the production order change. The B24D and the B24J both now have 6 attack instead of 7 attack. I'm happy they changed this card. This still feels very... this card still feels like it's one of the single best cards in the game. It's just so hilariously overpowered compared to anything else that does a similar thing. I would have liked to see this get 2 stats nerfs, like make it a 5-5. I think that's my suggestion in my video. You could make it a 6-4. You could make it a 6-5, but remove heavy armor. Yeah, the 6-5, this card's still too strong, and I hope they consider nerfing it in the future based on how much it continues to see play. But any nerf to the attack damage is fine. I'm tired of these decks that basically just do nothing all game, and then kill you because they just go face with some blitz bombers. Then we hit the buffs. So they buffed 13 Gebirgsjäger from its now base 2-2 to a 2-3. I don't think this is going to change the play rate of Alpine in the meta whatsoever. However, I'm a little skeptical of this change. I would have liked for them to change a different Alpine card. I don't know exactly what Alpine card I would suggest. But health is the #1 most important stat on any Alpine card, because they are cards that snowball if you can keep them on the board. So this is the, unless you make it 2 credits, but they're never going to make it 2 credits. So +1 health is the most important stat you could increase on this card, between attack and health. And Alpine is a deck that just needs the meta to slow down just enough, and then it's insane. Like, it's basically just, like, bad or absolutely insane. And Alpine, most people probably don't know this because it was a while ago, but there was a point where Alpine was the #1 deck in the game. Like, they made, like, one change to Alpine, or maybe they, like, nerfed the best aggro deck that wasn't Alpine. I forget exactly what the change was. But, like, suddenly Alpine was just the #1 deck, and everybody played it, and the meta sucked, because it was just who went first. And if you went first, but the opponent had it through the breach, and then you didn't have a follow-up, and they did have a follow-up, you lost the game. Like, Alpine was just... Alpine being meta is not a good thing. Alpine should be a, like, tier 2 deck that you can bring against, like, as a tech deck against certain matchups, or just play with on ladder to a decent win rate to have fun. So what I'm worried about this change is that if the meta does slow down, this type of change could suddenly make Alpine insane. I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying I'm a little skeptical of this. So, like, if in 6 months from now we're all getting oppressed by the Alpine meta, I will say I told you so. Then we have the #43 Commando. I love playing around with this unit. This unit's so bad, but I love playing with it so much. You might remember this from my double strength OTK deck. They just reduced the cost from 6 to 5. I'm fine with this change. I don't think it's going to see any play, but it makes the double strength OTK deck that much better. So I'm fine with that. Then we get to 15th Motor Rifles. This is a card that used to see a lot of play. And it actually saw play in my favorite deck of all time, which was the Soviet Japan Night Witch's Fatigue deck. 1/5 guard that stopped HQ damage on your opponent's turn was just good enough. Granted, it was good enough because basically every single aggro deck in the game ran straight HQ burn. And there was not a lot of healing. So getting just a 15th Motor Rifle stand was good enough. Also, like, all of the aggro units were 1 health, so a 1/5 guard was good. It got outclassed really, really hard. Like, it stopped being good enough to play, and then they released Bryansk Regiment. So buffing its attack from 1 to 2 makes it trade out so much better. It's harder for your opponent to just farm this. But coming out on turn 3, it still reaches the point where if you're going second, like, you play this on turn 3, and then they push up, like, a 5th Rangers on turn 4, and then your Motor Rifles basically doesn't do anything. So it's still probably not good enough. Like, Bryansk is just so much better than this in comparison. But, like, you know, if Burn starts becoming, like, a much bigger part of the meta, it's a card that you're going to consider. So I think that's cool. Bushmasters, this is an interesting change. They increased its attack from 3 to 4, and then they changed its effect. So before, when a unit was repaired, you would deal damage to an enemy equal to the damage repaired. So, like, if you healed 5, you would deal 5 damage to a random enemy. And if you healed 1 unit 5, 1 unit 1, you'd deal 5 damage to a random enemy and 1 damage to a random enemy. Now, it's when a unit is fully repaired, distribute damage, the damage repaired between random enemies. So now if you heal 5, you deal 1 damage 5 times to random enemies. Or if you heal 5 and 1, you deal 6 damage. Or you deal 1 damage 6 times to random enemies. So it makes Bushmasters generally better, I think. Especially with the state of the game, with there being pretty wide boards. And also just the massive downside of hitting HQ. If you like healing a big thing. I think this makes Bushmasters substantially better. Not good enough for the repair deck to be even considered, but, you know, better. Then we get the model, which went from 5 cost to 4 cost. It's the smokescreen guy. This guy does buff itself when it loses its smokescreen, so it attacks as a 4/5. Yeah, I'm fine with this change. At 5, this was much too hard to use. At 4, honestly, maybe we'll see some smokescreen decks. I think this effect is very, very powerful. It's not super easy to remove a 2/3 smokescreen bomber in the meta right now. So, like, if you just play this guy on turn 4, like, you play a bunch of smokescreen guys earlier, you play this guy on turn 4, and then suddenly you're getting +2/+2 on every single unit. Things could pop off pretty quickly. I'm not saying it's a good deck, but maybe it's a tier 2 deck, and if it is a tier 2 deck that somebody can go out and find, that's pretty cool. Then we have the Premier BFL, which is now cost 5 instead of 6. This card just... I'm not gonna lie, I forgot this card was in the game. I mean, costing 5, it's fine. I mean, like, France does have a bit of a burn, like, sub-archetype that you can go for, but the problem is the burn sub-archetype works best in a deck with basically no units, and this requires you to have lots of units on the board for this to do anything. So like I guess you could run this in like a US France deck, but why wouldn't you just run Rima and better US cards? Or just play Jobin Ally and play Blitzkrieg? Yeah, it's a fine card, but like there's just always going to be better options, and I don't know, I think that's fine. Then we get to the reworked cards. So, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of the reworked cards, because I know a lot of people are sort of mad about this, because they're cards that they really liked, and one either hoped they would come back in their original form to the standard game at some point, or they were playing with in Classic. Now, Classic is not a super popular game mode, and it's game mode 1939 likes to pretend that it doesn't exist. But there are people who play Classic, so there's people who will play these cards in Classic because they like playing these cards, and now can no longer play these cards because they have been reworked to be put back into Standard. So I understand that that's going to piss off a lot of people, and I understand that that's not... Like, it feels bad. I understand that it feels bad. However, I will defend 1939 on this one. Like, they need to get art for all of the cards. They need to get all of the cards into the game itself. And each additional card you have in the game is going to be additional file sizes. So having these cards that like 99% of the player base is not using, with very iconic card art and card names, does, like, it makes sense that you want to bring these back into the game. And let's be completely clear. These cards were never getting re-added to the game in their old version. So there's no loss for standard play. And if you're a Classic player who was playing these cards, I understand that it's annoying, but I mean, consider it that it just never got rotated and instead got nerfed. Like, people don't complain that much when cards get nerfed. Or cards get reworked because they're, like, too powerful in the current version. Like, so, for example, one of the changes we will get to, here, Wolfpack, like, this is one of the ones that, like, a lot of people are kind of annoyed about old Wolfpack being gone. People really like to draw denial. It was an archetype that a lot of people enjoyed to play with. However, Wolfpack was a card that the devs were unhappy with in 2021. I think it was July 2021, the devs said, we will change Wolfpack in the next update. Like, we will rework Wolfpack. And then they just never did. And then they removed it from Standard, and now they've reworked it and brought it back. So, like, I don't want to see anybody complaining about, like, oh my goodness, they're removing Wolfpack from Classic. This is so unfun and, like, unfair, and they hate Classic. No, Wolfpack was on the chopping block for the last, like, 2.5 years. They just finally got around to doing something about it. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think people's worries about reworking Classic cards is a little, over the top, but I do agree that 1939 should pay attention to Classic and should not just ruin every Classic card. Like, you know, they shouldn't just, like, start poaching cards from Classic. But anyways, let's jump into it. So, these don't have the old versions, but honestly, that's fine, because most of the old versions were terrible. So the first card up is Merchant Navy. It's now a 2-cost British countermeasure. When a enemy unit attacks, retreat it instead. This is a very powerful effect. This is a very frustrating effect. However, at 2 credits, I don't think that there's any, like, tier 1 deck that you're going to want to run this. Like, Britain just has better stall options. If you're worried about units in the front line to stall out, just play delaying tactics. If you're worried about units in the support line, just, like, play Monsoon Rot Supply Shortage. This is a card that could see play in the future moving forward if Britain gets additional retreat synergy cards, like the Typhoon, or if Britain gets additional countermeasure synergy cards. Maybe you want to run 1 or 2 of these. So it's a cool card to have in the game. It's also just another countermeasure to sort of wrap your head around when you're trying to think about playing around countermeasures, because you better believe randos on ladder are going to be playing this. And also, this, just a quick aside, you're now going to know every single countermeasure in the random person's deck after playing against them a single time. So, you know, the whole deck copying feature makes countermeasures worse, despite the fact that they're bringing back countermeasures. But anyways, yeah, Merchant Navy, pretty cool card. The QF 40mm, it's a 3-cost 1/2 British artillery with blitz, deployment to duplicate this unit if you have damaged the enemy HQ this turn. So, if you have done damage to the enemy HQ when you play this, you will get a second 1/2 with blitz. The The first time I read this, I thought it was like add it to your hand. So you could just like play an infinite number of them as long as you've dealt HQ damage that turn. I'm like, this is wild, but I don't know how to break it. This is substantially worse than that. So, you know, you play this and get 1/2 artilleries. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ways to buff the attack of units in the support line. However, 3 cost for a 1/2 blitz, like, Caddy is 2 cost for a 1.5/2 blitz. Now, obviously, you get 2 of them if you've dealt damage to the enemy HQ, but that means you also need to spend credits to damage the HQ, and then you need to spend 3 credits on this, and then 2 additional credits to operate this and the other artillery. And it's supporting Britain Audi, which is not an archetype. I will say it's interesting in the the 1 attack deck. So if you think about cards like, is it the Wildebeest? The cards where it's like, every time you deal combat damage with a 1 attack unit, deal damage to the enemy HQ. I think it's something like that. So like, you know, if you stick a Wildebeest and then you attack with the Wildebeest, it damages the enemy HQ, and then you play QF, get a second QF, and then you attack with both of them, and both of those trigger Wildebeest. I think that's where the deck is more likely going to go, rather than like a more traditional Audi style deck. But yeah, there's definitely some cool things you can cook with this card. Then you get the 22nd Guards Brigade, so it's a 2/5 guard that becomes veteran at the start of its 3rd turn on the battlefield. And when it becomes veteran, it deals 3 damage to each enemy. Now, getting this guy to stick is going to be difficult. I kind of doubt there's going to be much just raw playing this out. Like maybe in draft, like if they play this in draft, it could actually blow you out pretty hard, because in draft it's a little harder to remove units in the support line, like on command, especially that early in the game. But it's an AoE you can see play, and you can sort of play around it, sort of in the same way you play around carpet bombing. Now, obviously, they get this one for quote-unquote free if they trigger it. So it's a massive tempo swing, but like, you know, it's not like it's going to come out of nowhere. And what I like about this card is, if you are playing this in a constructed deck, obviously you can try to set up combos with it. Or if you're just playing against an aggro deck and you're worried about dying, you can just throw it on the board as a 2/5 guard with no intention of ever triggering its veteran effect. And, you know, 2/5 guard for 4 is not good. But it's better than dying. So, you know, it's an interesting card. And what's really cool about this is there's the 2 ways in the game to trigger veteran effects immediately. There's Battle Valor in the US. It's a 5-cost order, just immediately trigger. And there's a Soviet unit that gets a passive. It's a veteran Soviet unit that gets a passive effect that triggers other veterans immediately. So you could use it in either of those decks as just a 4-cost carpet bombing with a body. Maybe people start running Battle Valor in Britain US ramp, although they would need to then run additional veteran cards, which there's not really good additional veteran cards in Britain US. But yeah, it's a cool card that I think is going to lead to some innovation. Then we have Rapid Engagement. I think people are sleeping on this card. I think Rapid Engagement is absolutely insane. It's a 3-cost card. Remove a friendly unit from the battlefield, then return it and give it Blitz. So this does a couple things. 1, this gets around pin. So if the unit's pinned, your Rapid Engagement, it comes back unpinned with Blitz. This gets around suppress. So if the opponent suppresses your unit, you Rapid Engagement, it comes back with whatever like passive effect that you wanted it to have. This also heals the unit. So if the unit's at 1 health, you Rapid Engagement, it comes back at full health. This lets you give units that don't have Blitz, so you can play a unit, then Rapid Engagement it, and now it has Blitz. So it's like 3-cost give a unit Blitz, which is not great, but like, you know, giving additional utility to a utility card is always cool. And you can do some real wild combos with this. So, for example, you can do Comet, Burst of Fire, hit face for 10, Rapid Engagement on the Comet, Burst of Fire, hit face for 10 additionally. So that's a 4-card combo, 11 credits, deal 20 damage. And obviously you don't need to do the full combo. Like if you've done a little bit of damage, if you've dealt 6 damage, they're at 14. You do Comet, Burst of Fire, hit face for 10, Rapid Engagement, get Comet back, hit face for 4. You can do it with other cards. You can like do it on like a Tony or a Cheatin or anything. Like this card has so much versatility and such a wide range of decks. Like you can use this to heal back guards. You can use this to combo cards. You can use this to like offensively to get around stall cards. It's a really cool card. At 3, it's a little expensive. Like you're not going to want to run more than like 1 or 2 of these in a deck. However, at 2, this card would be absolutely broken. So 3 is the correct price for this, and even then it still might be a very good card. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this card. Then we have the 33 Panzer Grenadiers. A 3-cost 4/3 infantry for Germany. Deployment, give friendly tanks +2 attack. And this is permanent. So, you know, it's fine. I still feel like it's just worse than other options Heinz has. So I don't think this is really going to shake things up too much. I actually queued against somebody earlier today, trying out this card. And it did not seem particularly good when they played it. However, it's better than it used to be. It used to be a temporary effect. So, you know, all is good with this. Then we get to Wolfpack, which is send a target unit to its owner's hand. The enemy discards a random card. So previously it was enemy discards a random card. They don't draw on their next turn. Now, instead of denying the draw, it's return a unit to hand from the battlefield. So if it's in the front line, it's straight to hand. It's not retreat. It is return to hand. So it's like Wolfpack, but with insane tempo. Which is interesting. Now, obviously, there's something to consider is it returns it to hand and then discards. So there's the chance that it discards the thing you returned to hand. So it's hard to play on a board where they don't have good units. Because if you want to discard something, but their board is full of crappy units, you risk the chance of returning the crappy unit to hand and then discarding said crappy unit and not accomplishing anything. On the other hand, if their hand is empty, this is just 5 credits destroy a unit. However, it's like 5 credits suppress and then destroy a unit because it doesn't trigger destruction effects. Since you return it to hand and then discard it. So that's quite strong. Or like even if they have a couple cards in hand and there's a really big unit you're scared of, Wolfpack it to hand and then you have like, you know, like a 1 and 3, 1 and 4 to discard it. So this card is very good. Is it better than the previous Wolfpack? Time will have to tell. My gut feeling says I think it's a little worse than the previous Wolfpack, because there's less situations that you play it in to win the game. You can play it in more situations, because you can play it while you're behind, which is something you could not do with Wolfpack before. So I think it will improve, like I think it will move discard to more towards a balanced deck into more matchups, because previously discard like savaged control. Because they just sit back and do nothing, and you sit back and discard their entire hand and then win with a comet. And then it would, like, suck a lot versus something like aggro or, like, tempo mid-range. Because your hand would be, like, Annihilation, Wolfpack, Case Yellow, when it's turn 5 and they have 4 units on the board. So, you know, I think it helps move discard towards a more moderate deck in the middle. And, yeah, I do think we're going to see some discard decks, like with Case Yellow being just absolute trash and there not being any additional discard cards in the game. I think we're still going to see discard being an archetype, because we've seen discard being an archetype before they brought back Wolfpack. But like it's not going to be in the same way you might think of it from like a year ago, which is good, to be clear. The one other thing I have to say about this card is I do wonder if it will work the same way Airstrike works. So if you don't know, Airstrike is the German countermeasure. I think it's been rotated. Which was when the enemy deploys a unit, return it to hand and discard a card, which is very similar text to this. It's basically it's Wolfpack, but it was a countermeasure instead of an order. However, the issue with Airstrike, and this was always an issue, and as far as I'm aware, they've never patched it, but Airstrike has a 50-50 chance of discarding the card you return to hand. So if they have an 8-card, or like they have a 9-card hand, they play a unit, the unit goes back to their 9-card hand, there's now a 50% chance that the card you discard is the card they played, and a 50% chance it discards one of the other 8 cards. So the fact that Wolfpack is a very similar effect, I do wonder if Wolfpack is going to have the same bug. I think if it does have the same bug, it's finally going to get fixed, because no one played Airstrike enough for the devs to care. But, you know, I think Wolfpack's going to continue to see a lot of play, so if this bug does exist, you know, it means it's finally going to get patched. Then we have the Su-152, a 4/4 heavy armor tank for Soviets deployment. Your other tanks get +1 attack and +1 heavy armor. This card is a card I'm very excited about and also very terrified about, because this deployment effect is absolutely insane. So obviously the number one comparison you could make is to the Panzer F. The 3/3 deployment, your other tanks get +1/+1, and your German tanks gain Blitz. Or is it the other way around? I don't remember. So this is, instead of +1 health, it's +1 heavy armor, which is in some cases good, in some cases bad. But you get 3 of these, and you can run these on top of Panzer F, and also the body is better than Panzer F, because Panzer F is a 3-3 2-op. This is a 4-4 heavy armor 1-op. So, like, is German Soviet Heinz gonna be insane? And by insane, I just mean like a low tier 2, or high tier 2, low tier 1 deck? Maybe. We'll have to tell. Then we get the 10th Guards Regiment. So this is another 2-5 guards for Soviet. This one says, cannot retreat, cannot be suppressed. So this is basically just a 2-5 guard the opponent has to trade into. Obviously, you can be still targeted by orders. You can, like, hammer it, but most tempo decks do not run direct removal like that. So this is a 3-cost 2-5 guard that guarantees your opponent trading into it, which is pretty good. Like, this is probably better than motor rifles. 2-5, like, Soviets does not lack for early guards. They have Bryansk regiments. So I don't think this is going to see a lot of play, but, it's an interesting card. It's a good card. Then we get No Retreat, which is a 0-cost target unit gains, cannot retreat, cannot be suppressed. So obviously this is just the same effect as the previous thing, but now you can give it to any unit for 0 credits. And this includes planes, this includes artillery. So this is quite interesting. It makes it easier to play some of the bigger units in Soviets, like 272nd, because previously you played 272nd for 8 credits, and then your opponent, like, suppresses it, or your opponent half-tracks it, or your opponent rafts it. If you can play 272nd and guarantee the destruction will trigger, and guarantee that it stays on board until your opponent deals 6 damage to it, you're probably willing to pay a card for that. That's quite a powerful effect. An additional very spicy effect you can do with this is the Beriev, the 1-4 Soviet plane that reduces the cost of the next unit you play by 2, reduces the cost of all units you play by 2, but whenever you play a unit, it retreats itself. You play Beriev, you play No Retreat on the Beriev, and then you just have a permanent -2 cost of all units. Now, obviously, that requires you to play 2 cards which are not great on their own, and then it still requires you to stick the Beriev. But I'm sure that people can figure out some wild combos. I already saw some person, I think it was Bubbles, had worked out how to do a Beriev OTK, or make the Beriev OTK easier with Kitty Hawks. But it does require getting 3 Berievs, so, nothing that's going to shake up the meta, but it's some interesting combos you might want to try out if you have access to the cards. Then we have Mobilization. This is one that a lot of people were sort of mad about. So the previous Mobilization was 5-cost, draw 3 for US. It is now 2-cost, draw 2 units from your deck, discard them at the end of your turn. I really like this card. This is a very interesting card. Some of the immediate synergies you might think of is running this in the Japan-US self-discard deck, because, you play Mobilization and it draws Betty Ginja. And now you don't have to spend the credits on those cards. It's just 2 credits, summon a Betty, and deal 1 damage to all enemy units. Or all enemies. Like, that's just a cool combo. And you play this at the start of your turn. This is going to encourage people to draw first, because you play this at the start of your turn, and then see what units you draw, and then play your turn around. Like, are you fine with those units being discarded? Or do you want to spend your credits to play the unit to prevent it from being discarded? It's also just 2 credits search for units, so this can be used in some sort of combo deck where you're looking for specific units that you want to play immediately. So, for example, in Britain, like, if you're playing Britain with, like, 2 units and you play turn 2 mobilization, or you do, like, turn 3 mobilization to find pioneers or something. There's some really interesting combos for this. You can do with this. You can just play this in a regular, like, aggressive deck that provides a lot of 1-drops. Like, you play this on, like, turn 5 and then play 2 1-drops. And you're chilling. Now, people are mad that old mobilization is gone. And I think this is very valid. So, 1939 has decided that Britain is going to be the only nation that gets unconditional card draw. That did not used to exist. Mobilization existed in the game before Lend-Lease. Mobilization and Convoy are both from the basic set. So before, it was Britain gets Convoy, with just 3-cost draw 2. And then US, which is the ramp deck, it plays the big stuff, gets Mobilization, which is the big card draw. And Convoy is a standard, Mobilization is a special. Because US gets the big stuff, they get the big credits, they play ramp decks, they get Mobilization. And then they released Lend-Lease and made it a British card and then refused to rotate it in the first rotation, and they refused to ever change it. And the fact that they're doing this to mobilization makes me think that they probably intend to bring back Lend-Lease at some point, which I really hope they don't. I honestly think that Lend-Lease might have been one of the worst cards ever to be released in the game, just not in terms of, like, breaking the game, quote-unquote, but just in terms of, like, the amount of impact it has had on, like, the further design space of cards is actually immense for a card that is just very straightforward 7 cost draw 4. And when it came out, no one played it. Like, no one was impressed with Lend-Lease when it came out at first. They were just like, this is too expensive, you never need to draw this many cards at once. It wastes your entire turn. So yeah, it is sad to me that Britain is just unconditional card draw, and US doesn't get anything to reward itself for ramping in terms of being able to draw cards. But moving on, we have Embargo, which is now 2 credits. The enemy gets 2 fewer credits next turn. So this is credit denial done correctly. So you invest 2 credits, and you take away 2 credits from the opponent. It's literally just like you go down a card and nothing changes. Except you can use this for unspecific turns to make specific tempo plays, to stop specific credit cost combinations or specific credit cost cards from coming out on curve. So this is like the Galaxy Brain card. This is the card where you have to have a read on what your opponent's playing, what your opponent's trying to do, what your opponent has in hand. This card gets better the better you are at the game. Now, this card's also just not that good. Unfortunately, that is the reality. This card's not going to see much play, I don't think, outside of, like, maybe combo decks, and in that case, you're playing it, like, just a substantially worse raid. Like, this card compared to raid is just, like, miles worse. It's hilarious. However, you know, it's temporary. This is credit denial done correctly. Can we, like, axe a Southern plan already? Please. Then we have the 47th Infantry Regiment. This is a 4-4. It's still the 4-4 from before, but now it becomes veteran at the start of your turn if you have 13 or more credits. And the veteran version is an 8-8 with a blitz, and when it moves to the front line, add a copy of it beside it, and the copy will be, as far as I'm not sure if the copy is the 4-4 unveteran version or the copy is an 8-8 with blitz. But since it's not moving into the front line, it's summoning in the front line. It doesn't, like, just continue to trigger. I'm not sure how this card works. Either way, this card is just objectively bad. However, you're going to lose a lot of games to very, very greedy ramp players on ladder who are going to, like, play this and then play Battle Valor to trigger it immediately, and then, like, push up and get the 8-8s in the front line and hit you in the face, and you're going to cry because you're playing, like, a fatigue deck. Then we have Code of Bushido. This one's not actually in the game right now because it's bugged. So the Code of Bushido reads, choose and discard an air unit to destroy a unit with 5 or less attack. This is a really cool card. Before it was, choose and destroy a unit, discard a random card. So now you get to choose the discard at the downside of 1, the card you discard is substantially more restrictive. Like, you might just not have an air unit in your hand, and then you can't play this card. And 2, it's 5 or less attack. However, 90% of the things in the game have 5 or less attack, like things in the game that see play. So this is quite a good tempo card, and as we're going to see, obviously there's the Betty, and there's the Ginja, but there's going to be an additional card, like an air unit that Japan wants to discard. So Code of Bushido is a very interesting looking card. It's looking really cool, and I imagine it's going to see some tier 2 play. The problem with it right now is there's a bug where this card can target the HQ, so you can just destroy the opponent's HQ on turn 3. So that's why if you look at the game right now, like today, the card was like shadow banned. You can't use the card until the fix goes out to stop you from blowing up the opponent's HQ. But it is very funny. Then we get the Sally. This is the card I was talking about. The Sally is a 4-cost, 3-operation, 5/2 bomber. So this is probably one of the worst cards in the game, just in terms of stats and op and cost. With the effect, if this unit is discarded, draw 2 cards. So it's literally just a convoy. You never play this card ever. This card exists exclusively to be discarded. So if you combine this with Code of Bushido, like, that's pretty good. Like, that's very high tempo. That's a very strong play. Now, obviously, that requires you to have these 2 cards in your hand at once. But then when you stack on, like, 4 Bettys, 3 Ginjas, suddenly that's 10 air units in your deck that you're very you want to discard. And Code of Bushido starts to look really good. I'm excited to see the Betty decks. And then we have B59 Kate, a 4-cost 3/2 bomber, 2 operation cost. When you discard a card, deal 1 damage to all enemies. Now, deal 1 damage to all enemies that can trigger multiple times a turn is really, really powerful. I kind of want to see people go into Classic and play like Kate Feigned Retreat, discard your entire hand, and just like nuke their board. That sounds really fun. It's silly and bad, but sounds really fun. Kate is a difficult card to evaluate because in general, I think it's a little too slow. Betty typically does not discard a lot of cards at once in its turn. And even if you can do that, you're going to be wanting to discard the cards on earlier turns rather than saving it for the Kate. However, there's also situations where Kate can just absolutely lock your opponent out of the game. So I could see Betty decks running like 1 or maybe 2 copies of Kate, but like I don't think it's going to be the best card in the game. I think it's going to be a very like matchup specific how good this card is type of card. But you know, you'd probably rather run Kate than Tora Tora. And the question is just like, do you want this on top of Ginja? Because I definitely think Ginja's better than this. And then we get to the last 2 reworked cards. We have the B26 Group Breton, which is a 4-cost 3/4 French bomber with the text, the first order you give each turn deals damage equal to its cost to the enemy HQ. So people are cooking with this card. Because if you have this card on the board, and then you play Commonwealth, you deal 32 damage. If you have 3 copies of this card on the board, and then you play Commonwealth, you deal 56 damage. Yeah, how easy are you going to be able to stick this card on the board? France has no credit cheat. Britain has very limited credit cheat, and that's like sort of the first nation people think of. Like I suppose you could play like Britain, France, Guard, and just, or like Control, and then try to stick this behind a Guard, and then, you know, like burn 6 damage when you play Monsoon Rod or whatever. But like, why wouldn't you just play better cards? I don't know. There's also people cooking with like Bismarck, like if you do Reichsbanks and then you get like B26 Bismarck and you deal 27 damage. Issue is that's an 18 credit turn that requires 3 cards in your hand, one of which is an elite. And yeah, I don't know. And it's a very scary effect, but I just do not see any way you can reasonably break this card at the moment. And then you get Mare Nostrum, the infamous card that's coming back in a much more fair, although quite strong way. It's a 1 credit order. Deal 1 damage to a unit. If your HQ has more defense than the enemy HQ, deal 3 damage instead. So this is sort of like an air sup type card. There's not a ton of ways to deal damage, or to heal early. But there's a couple ways you can do this. So 1, you could play a deck like L640, and play L640, hit them in the face on turn 1 for 1 damage, and now on turn 2 you can Mare Nostrum for 3. Or, if you're playing against a deck like Self-Damage, or just Soviets in general, like you play out a 1-drop, they play Bloody Sickle, Mare Nostrum, hits for 3. Or you can do something like, I don't know, turn 2 Honey into Convoy, or like turn 2 Fiat, they trade into the Fiat, something Mare Nostrum is hitting for 3. Like, it doesn't need to come out on turn 2 or something to be broken, or like good, I should say. And you can always just play it on turn 1 to deal 1 damage. Like, if they play a Gebirgs Pioneer or a Cavalry Regiment or something, you can just play out Mare Nostrum on 1. This is a very good card. The issue is Italy is really, 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 really remarkably bad in the meta right now. Because 7th Alpini gets savaged by Suppress, and it gets savaged by the number of Devil's Brigades going around. So, you know, if Italy Control becomes playable, and I imagine it will, so when Italy Control becomes playable in the future, Mare Nostrum is going to be a very good card, and in the meantime, I don't know, maybe check out L640. But that brings us to the end of the card changes. So there's only 2 last articles to take a look at. This one is the just everything else. So everything else, there's National Progress is now goes up to 350, or sorry, goes up to 500. So they finally increased the level from 350 to 500. We'll talk about this in a bit. There's some new tool tips, some stuff for mobile. There's a max deck amount indicator. And then a bunch of bug fixes. And if you go to the official patch notes, it includes all of the previous stuff we've talked about, plus a long list of the bug fixes if you want to go through and take a look at that. And then it introduces one additional thing that I think is relevant, which is Officer Club leaderboard changes are now displayed immediately after completing a battle where your position on the leaderboard has changed. So that is very interesting. That's not something they talked about before. This might have been just like a last second change, or like if it is a last second change, it does further question what the development cycle was looking like if they can't add an opt-in feature. But they've also added like new music. But let's finally take a look at the game itself. So there's quite a few other things that you'll see that they didn't mention. At least as far as I have seen, they didn't mention anywhere in the previous all of the dev blogs. There's some things they did not mention specifically. So one is the daily missions. It now looks like this. It's a transparent background. I did complete my daily missions, but you know, you'll see. I'm not sure how to feel about this. I don't know. I think it's fine. Maybe it'll grow on me. But yeah, it's whatever. Another change that they did not announce is they changed how gold cards look. So if you just look at the gold cards on the collection screen, and this is how they look on the battlefield as well, I think, you can see it's a much deeper yellow. Like some people say it looks deep fried. I do not like the way that they look here. I think they look worse. And I'm someone who cares a lot about gold cards. I think these look much worse. However, I'm not sure if this is a bug or not, because if you click on the card and you go full screen on it, it looks better. Like, this looks better than... Like, look at this. The font's bolded. It stands out clearer. It looks a lot more gold. And then you exit it out, and then it looks like this. Like, what is going on here? Why does it look so much better when it's highlighted? Like, I don't know if this is just, like, some weird filter bug. You can also see, like, along the edges, there's, like, a very bright gold along the edges. I don't know if that's a bug as well. Like, surely this must be unintentional, because you can't look at this, just, like, the way it looks on its own, and say that this looks like a good finished product that is better than what it replaced. Now, looking at this, if you tell me that it looks better than what it previously replaced, I'd say yes. I'd still question why there's, like, a bit of, like, a double edge on the side, but this looks generally good. This does not. Also, another change, we're just going to jump into a game, just to show off some of the features inside the game, but another change is you can now customize all of your deck stuff from the battle screen, and you don't have to, like, click on the deck, find the edit button, and then you open the deck. Like, it just makes it so much easier to quickly customize stuff, which, as we will see in a minute, is going to be relevant. But what I also like about this is there's certain things like void items and emotes, which are still global to all decks of that nation. That's something that I hope they change in the future. But, you know, if you do want to switch it up when you switch decks, it's much easier now because you just do it here and don't have to, like, go back to your collection every single time you want to change an emote. So yeah, now let's just queue up a game, and I will go through some of the changes as what they actually look like, because reading it is very different than seeing it. Okay, so here we are, and we'll see a few immediate things. One, you can see these gold cards still look like absolute trash. And two, you no longer see your opponent until after the mulligan. Now, you might be thinking, oh, well, this is going to help with the deck copying thing, because now you don't know who to mulligan for until after you mulligan. So you might know their deck list after the mulligan, but, you know, like, before the mulligan, you just have to guess. One, that's just stupid. Like, if you're going to have you be able to figure out who it is, just have you be able to figure out who it is. Don't, like now I can see it's Daniel, and, can I no longer... I just realized you can't see the number anymore. Like, you can't hover over their name and see their number to add them afterwards. Oh, this is going to make it so much harder to play against Chinese players. Oh my goodness. Because, like, with Chinese players, I personally, how I record stats with Chinese players, there's some usernames that I'm going to recognize. Of course, like, from tournaments. But most of the time, I just write down what number, like, what their player number is. You can't see that in-game anymore. Just... It is remarkable. They keep finding ways to mess it up. Some other things. Pay attention to these credits. This is supposedly supposed to look better than it did before. I'm somewhat skeptical. Apologies to my opponent. But, look, it spins when you play it. And honestly, that looks fine. Then, when it starts his turn, it spins again, and it makes a noise. I don't know. You should be able to be hearing that. It's like sort of like a jangling noise. And it triggers twice when you gain an additional credit from cards like Geberg's Pioneer. And like if you're playing really fast and you see these credits like flying every time, honestly, it's just like kind of nauseating. It gets nauseating very quickly. Like it's interesting for like the first like 10 seconds, and then it's just like, oh, actually, I don't like this. Yeah, then the other change you can see, this is the button I was talking about. This is the cards history now. So if you click on this, again, the double jangle, my goodness. If you click on this, you can see the last 3 turns. So this is a lightning bolt for attacked. This is a arrow for move, but then this is played. This is moved for some reason. This is an order, but it shows up as moving because I guess it's moving across the board. And then you scroll up, which seems weird to me. Maybe that's just me, but yeah, you can scroll in, but as you can see, it grays out everything else except for my opponent ZZZing me. And then you can't, like, if I try to interact with the card, it pulls me out of the card's history. So yeah, this feature is not implemented correctly. Wait, can you see 4 turns? No, I guess it's because you see... Wait, why am I seeing 4 turns on this? They said you only see 3 turns. Oh, it disappeared. The heck? Alright. Well, that's bizarre. Now, just gotta win the game because there's a couple more things that I want to show you afterwards. So now you got a little bit of gameplay because I don't really feel like editing this part out. Yeah, so, well, I'm just getting blown out by Depths of Winter, apparently. Let me know what you think about all these changes. Which changes that do you like? Which changes do you dislike? How do you feel about everything overall? Because there's some changes that I genuinely think look good. Like, you know, the decks for new players, like the pre-built decks. That's just cool. But oh my goodness, some of these changes are absolutely awful. And I'm about to get blown out by 7th Alpini because I said that it's bad. So, there's... I mean, honestly, I might just surrender this game, to be completely honest. Just because I don't really care about elo points again, because again, I'm not going to be climbing this season. And I want to show, yeah, we're getting out of here. So, when the game ends, this part is interesting, to say the least. So the game ends, the defeat screen shows up, you can click the view battlefield, you know, you can emote, you can hover over cards, you can open the cards history, you can scroll through. Then you leave Battlefield, and then you go to the next screen. This goes up. It no longer shows you the extra yellow as to what part the Season Pass gave you. I don't know why they got rid of that. Like, it says Season Pass here, but it doesn't show you, like, a difference of, like, what XP you gained normally and what XP you gained because of the Season Pass. Also, this, like, 350 shows up really dirty. I don't know why. And then you go to the next screen, and you get this. You get this big pop-up with your leaderboard position. You see what it was before and where it goes, and then you either get like this like cheerful noise if you win, or this like boom if you lose. This is incredibly tilting. I don't know how other people feel about this. Like, I don't know how people who don't rank, like play ranked very much, feel about this. Personally, I feel like this, I like playing cards with game sounds at max. The stupid credit jangle and the, like, ba-dum every time you lose a game is going to make me mute cards. I love card sound design. These 2 changes are absolutely awful. Also, personally speaking, I don't care about leaderboard position. I care about actual elo. So, like, if they wanted to represent something interesting that would actually save me time from having to manually go to the leaderboards and check my elo change, it would be cool if they, you know, showed elo change rather than leaderboard position. And again, this is a very easy thing to customize. You could have a settings be show leaderboard position, show elo, don't show anything. And just make it a drop-down menu where you pick one of the 3 things. So, like, it's they have so many good ideas that are just implemented so poorly that they actually make it worse than if they hadn't implemented anything. I really hope all of this is expanded on. I'm trying to be constructive. I know I've said a lot of really bad things about 1939 and the work that they've done, but I'm glad that they are still trying to put in work into these elements of the game. They just, like, I don't, what universe do they live on where they think any of this is good? A couple other things that I really wanted to see in this, an expansion to the number of deck slots would be really, really nice. But of course they didn't. Something that they got rid of a while ago and they haven't brought back. So now that there's levels beyond 350, you can, of course, always see the next 50 levels. But you can't see what the emotes are before you unlock them. You used to be able to do this, you can't anymore. So I can't see what the, 365 and the 385 emotes are for the 4 nations I have at 350. And that's really annoying. That's another feature that I kind of hoped that they would implement. There's also still a limit of 100 on the friends list. So again, when they're doing something, like when they had a post being like friends list enhancements or whatever, I was like, oh, they're finally gonna add more slots. They did not add more slots, and let me move my webcam over here. So you see 99. These are just random people who sent me friend requests. I accept this one, 100. Oh, did they add more slots? Or is this a visual bug? I know that there's a visual bug before where it says you can have over 100. I'm going to quickly restart the game and we will see. Yep. So I've just restarted the game. It's still at 99 and all of these requests are back. So you can't actually go above 100. And other people can hit 100. I can't. I'm stuck at 99. I think I might have like a bugged friend or something. But yeah, the fact that they didn't do anything here is kind of insane. And then if we go down here, we get the new feature, my last 3 opponents. So, you know, the guy who was ZZZing me, I can add him as a friend. Or I can copy his deck. And let's go down. Deck slot. Import. This is the deck he was playing. It was Soviet Italy with 1 naval engagement. He's running 1 copy of Partisans. This is very useful information if I'm going to be playing against him. He's running 2 copies of Petliakov. He's playing Cossack. That's a card I can play around. 1 copy of Hammer. That's a card I can play around. See how toxic this is? Now I just put this in a Google Docs. I don't need to keep this in my account. I just put this in a Google Doc somewhere. And then, like, you know, a month from now, when I queue into whatever the guy's name was, Daniel playing Soviets, I just pull up his Soviet Italy list, and I'm like, oh, it's probably Soviet Italy. And one final annoying thing about the deck, like, again, I hate the deck copy feature, but if you know, if we take a look over here at a notepad and paste what is copied, it's just the code. You don't see, you have to go into the game and build the deck to get the actual cards, which just means that if you are doing the thing where you're putting every single deck you play against into a master document, it's just adds so many extra clicks. There's also extra clicks you have to do at the end of the game. There's extra clicks you have to do at the start of the game. Like, it's just so frustrating how unoptimized this terrible mechanic is actually put into the game. Going forward, you'll be able to copy any deck from an opponent who plays against you. Copying a deck works the exact same way as you copy your own deck code from the game, where you will be able to directly import it into a new and free deck slot, or paste it into a text document to get a full breakdown of what's in the deck. This is just untrue, 1939. Untrue. Yeah, it boggles the mind. All around, I'm happy that they're implementing all of these new things. I'm happy that they're still working on the game, but holy crap, is this the worst mechanic they have ever introduced? And as a whole, it brings down this patch, and not just this, like, if the deck copy mechanic didn't exist, this patch as a whole, it would definitely leave a more positive impact on me. I would keep playing the game, but I would still have a lot of critical feedback to give about some of these UI changes, about some of the sound changes, the just last second choice to make it very hit you in the head about losing games on ranked. Yeah, it boggles my mind that 1939 thinks any of this is acceptable, but I really hope that they're willing to listen to feedback. not just from myself. I hope that if you have feedback to give, you give it either here in the comments. There's a link to my Discord in the description of the video. You can share feedback there. You can go to the main Cards Discord, go to the suggestions forum, make your own suggestions thread to share your feedback, or put your feedback in the comments of a different suggestion. 1939 does pay attention to the community. They do read the Discord. They apparently don't really listen to any of us, but they do read it. So, give any feedback you can, try to keep it positive, and let me know what you think of this patch. That will be it for me for this video. I will catch you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching.